Now we have got Phyllis from Mulga, famous Paul Finebaum caller, on in just a minute. Here is a clip of her from last week on the Paul Finebaum Show giving her opinion on the playoff committee.
Answer me the question, when is Bama going to get some respect? When they kill somebody on the field? Good grief! What do you think you're doing? You're not even looking at what's the best and what works the hardest. Give Bama some credit and quit saying we've not beat anybody. Do you think LSU was a nobody team? LSU was far from a nobody team. That was hard in Death Valley. And any other team would say the same thing if they were not in Death Valley. I just don't understand it. I disagree. I think Alabama was just dumped on. Just absolutely dumped on and passed down the road. And if they beat Mississippi State, they're going to put Baylor in Alabama's place, and then they're going to say, well, Alabama really didn't beat anybody. All they did was beat Mississippi State, the number one freaking team in the country. Get a grip, committee. Paul, all I can say is, road tide.
And now we're going to try to show you a different side of Phyllis. Here is the interview I did with her yesterday. I hope you all enjoy. All right, well, Phyllis, thank you for being on the show. First of all, Phyllis, let me ask you, what did you think of the Mississippi State-Alabama game yesterday?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, it was a scary game. It came down almost to the wire. I mean, with the comeback they were making, and I was afraid that they were going to make a stronger comeback than that, and maybe go past us and win the game. It really came down to the last part of the game before I could relax. Until those last few minutes, I was not relaxed during the entire game. It was a hard-fought game. I mean, I've got to give props to Mississippi State. They were a tough team to beat, but then again, they were number one in the country as well.
Phyllis, let's go back to your early childhood. I guess this is where it started. How long have you been an Alabama fan?
Since I was about 4 years old.
Wow. So where does all the passion come from?
My dad. My dad was he was a huge fan of Coach Bear Bryant, and Coach Bryant's name was just a household name to us. I mean, we were all little kids, myself and my 5 brothers. I didn't have any sisters, and I'd sit on Daddy's knee in the 60s, and he would turn on this big old radio. It was a piece of furniture, basically, and he'd turn it on and sit me on his knee, and my brothers would sit around it like kids at Christmas time, and we would listen to the majority of the Alabama games back then. We had to listen to them. We had a TV, but, they were on TV very sparse. And we would just sit around there and just hoop and holler and just carry on for the Tide. And it was just embedded in me. I mean, all 5 of my brothers to this day are staunch Alabama fans and never have been anything any different, never wanted to be, nor I. And I think it was the tradition, the Bear Bryant tradition, and all the tradition that's come through the years that Bama has given this state something to be proud of. And I look up to them for that. That's just one thing. But I take pride because, Alabama back then, they were down. I mean, things were hurting. This city was hurting. This state was hurting. But we had Alabama football to listen to and to take our minds off all the horrible things that was going on here in this state. And it just gave us something to be proud of when we didn't have very much at that time.
When you talk about the horrible things that were going on, what are you referring to?
I'm talking about the racism. I'm talking about the days of Birmingham. I lived in Western Birmingham when all that was happening, and like the hoses and things like that. I was only about 11 years old, but I remember that affecting me. I mean, it just broke my heart. The bombing, that church bombing. I went to my daddy, and those little girls was about my age, and I told him, I said, why would somebody do that, Daddy? And he would tell me, because of the color of their skin, Phyllis. And I'm going to tell you something. I better not ever, ever see you or one of my sons ever being unkind to anyone because of the color of their skin. You'll get my belt on your back end if you do, and he meant it. He raised us not to be that way. He raised us not to be racist, and I'm glad he did, because it's what Birmingham is mostly known of in the other states, like the northern states and things like that. Birmingham has come so far. The state has come so far, but it was things like that that hurt me. That put an impression on me, and that was when I felt like, I was for the underdog, and I felt like that's what was happening to the black people. I felt like they were being done so wrong, but me as a child, I couldn't do anything about it. And then when the church bombing happened, that just broke all of our hearts, and back then you had to keep your mouth shut, and I didn't like that. I didn't like to be shut up when I had something to say. So I got in trouble a lot of times, but I didn't care. I went there anyway. If I saw someone mistreating someone, I told them what I thought of them, and I'd try to fight them, because that's what I believed in. I just didn't believe in that.
Wow. Let me ask you something, Phyllis. Do you support any other Alabama sports or any other high school teams or pro teams?
Oh Lord, yeah, the gymnastics, of course the basketball, but none of it is as deep rooted as the football, as Alabama football is. But yes, I support all of the athleticism and degrees of athletics at Alabama that they're in. I support them. I buy the memorabilia, and I not here recently, but I've bought tickets to the games, and I've always participated, and tried to put my part back into what they were giving to me, and what they were giving to me was a fun time and memories and pride, and that's what I felt from the time I was a little bitty girl.
Any pro teams?
Yes, I like the Packers. I like the Green Bay Packers. I really do.
Well, they were destroying, who was it, Philadelphia a few minutes ago?
Well, I didn't say that because they're good right now, and I like the New Orleans Saints. I like them. I've always been kind of partial to those two teams, and maybe it's because I have cousins that are huge Packer fans, and they were raised in the North and everything, and they were all huge fans of the Green Bay Packers, and I think I just followed suit with them. When they came down here, they got Alabama. If we went up there to visit them, we got the Packers.
Wow. Well, Phyllis, let me ask you something. How have you handled, obviously you've gotten national fame, and it's come pretty fast. How have you handled that fame of calling into the Paul Finebaum Show?
John, I'm telling you, I told Paul in the beginning, well, I've talked and told people that it was scary. It was scary. I've never been in the public like this before. I've always kind of been a private person to myself, and
right.
But I loved the fact that I could get on the radio and voice my opinion, and I was comfortable with that. But I'm overwhelmed. I'm humbled. I swear to you, I'm absolutely humbled and overwhelmed, because it's like you said, it's coming so fast, and I don't know what to do with myself, John. But I can tell you this, I will never, ever be anyone but me. I will never be anyone but myself. And if I'm not accepted as myself, then I don't want to be accepted. That's just the way I am. And yes, it's overwhelmed. That's the only word I know to say. And it's, I just don't understand it. I don't know what I have done to get people to follow me like they have. I don't know. And I just keep on being me, and that's all I'm going to be. And I don't know why all of this has blown up because of me being me, but that's all I know to tell you, John. I've never, like I said, I've never wanted to be anything but me. Nobody special, and I'm not anybody special, and I never will. I never will be. I'm just me. I'm just Phyllis.
Well, do you enjoy the fame just a little bit?
I'm telling you, it's scary. It really is. It's scary because when I get on Twitter, I hardly ever get to read a lot of posts because the tweets I do read, I'm constantly, tweeting back to them, and I enjoy that. I try to follow everybody that follows me and answer back, and I enjoy that. But it does get overwhelming. Again, there's my word. But no. I can't believe it, to be honest with you. I can't believe the swell that all of this has come to fruition. It's hard to believe. And I'm just kind of stunned by it. And it's not that I don't appreciate it. It's not that at all. But I am humbled by it. And that's another way my mother and daddy raised us. They raised us to be humble and to treat others the way we want to be treated. And that's exactly the way I am, unless I have a problem with you, like,
right.
My favorite sport, football. And, of course, it turns out to be Alabama football.
Well, let me ask you this, Phyllis. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
A lot of people want to know, when you call in, is it, at least these days, is it more of an act, or are you calling in because you have something that you want to say?
Let me tell you something. When I call a radio station today, I call when I get angry. I listen intently, and if anything is said or done, and I read it or hear it on the radio, I have an opinion about it, I call the radio, and you can bet I'm just as mad as I sound. I can't script a thing. I'm not smart enough to get on a radio station and read from a script. I'm just not that smart. I'm too dumb for that. But when I call, I have it inside of me, and it comes out, and what I say, whatever it is I say, I said it, and it's done, and there's no taking it back. But I do get a release from it. I feel better. After I vent, I can relax, and I do feel better.
Phyllis, let's go back to when you first started calling in. How long have you been calling into the Paul Finebaum Show?
Since the early 90s, around 93.
So what prompted you to call into his show for the first time?
Coach Stallings was being disrespected, and bad things were being said about him, and he had just been at Bama a couple of years, and it was brought up about he lost the first 3 games, and if he didn't get through that season, they were talking about, calling for his head, and I really thought the ever-loving world of Coach Stallings and his family. And when I heard that, I asked my husband, I said, "Who's that on the radio?" And he told me, and I said, "Have you got the number?" He said, "No, but in a minute they'll give it out." They gave the number out, and I come back in there, and he said, "Here's the number." So I called him, and I just point blank asked him, I said, "Why are you saying these things about Coach Stallings?" And he just bluntly, basically was saying about the same thing. And when he did, I just went into a rage, and I chewed him out and spit him up. And I didn't call after that. And 2 months later, I find out that people start telling me this radio station keeps asking people if they know a Phyllis from Mulga. Is that you? And I said, why? Because they're looking for you. And I said, what do they want? They want you to call. So I called to see what they wanted, and Bob Lockham answered the phone, my dear friend. And he said, Phyllis, where have you been? I said, I've been at home. I said, I've been nowhere. And he says, we have looked for you forever. And I said, don't put me back on there with that guy, because I'm telling you something, I'm going to chew his butt out. Paul. And he said, no, it's just that he wants you to keep calling the show. And so I told him, I said, well, there's no problem, but I can't just call and just talk about anything. You know, I have to have a subject. And a lot of times I rant, and when I do, it's because something has been said, such as the first time I called. Coach Stallings was belittled, and I called in and took up for him, and it's just the way it was. And that relationship was born right then and there, because Paul made sure anything I loved or liked, he stepped on it. And I called in to chew him out.
Well, so how has your relationship with Paul evolved over time?
He's a good friend of mine. I want to tell you, Paul Finebaum is a different person out from under that microphone. People think he's an instigator, and it's his job. It's radio. It's what he does best, and that's his career, and he knows what he's doing, and he does it well. He does it the best, and I just, Paul is my friend. I've been to the Finebaum Christmas parties with the other callers, to the Finebaum golf tournaments, and been invited there. And I've met Paul through those means. I went to Huntsville with him for him to give a speech one day at this club in Huntsville, and it was a luncheon. And somehow Paul got me up on the stage with him, and I'm just standing there like a nut, and he turns around and says something about Coach Stallings, and when he did, I jumped him right there on that stage. And he turned around and he said, now, you people say this woman is not real. Why don't you say it now? I said, what are you talking about? I mean, I felt like I'd just been slammed, but he's a good friend of mine. Paul is a good person. He really is. And he is stuck with our friendship all these years, and I with him. Not just me, my husband, and our son. I mean, he's known my son since he was a little boy, the preteen, and it's just been, we have developed this friendship, and I would do anything in the world for Paul because he's my friend, and I believe Paul would do the same for me if I were to ask.
Phyllis, you are a cancer survivor, and you've told me twice. Is that right?
Yes.
What was that like, having to overcome that?
Well, in '96, the fall of '96, I went to the doctor, and they thought I'd had a little bit of pneumonia. They X-rayed me, and they found a spot on, and it turned out to be lung cancer. And so they sent me to the surgeon and set that up. And I'm very sorry about that. Oh, you're fine. And so I went to see the surgeon, and he told me he would operate on me in 2 weeks, which turned out to be November the 22nd of 1996. And he removed my upper lobe of my left lung. And so anyway, I fought through that cancer to keep it from coming back. And then in January, they told me they had found a small node right by my voice box, and it looked precancerous. So they did surgery on my neck, on my throat in January after my lung cancer surgery in November. And that is part of what's wrong with my voice. It did affect my voice box. I mean, my voice used to not be so crass and gravelly like this. And so a lot of people wonder about the way I sound, and that had a lot to do with it, which kind of upset me, when I would call shows, because I knew that I didn't sound great. I knew that I didn't sound good, and I was made fun of a lot because of that. But I let it roll off my back, and I just gave it all to the good Lord. He got me through it. That's the only thing I can say. And my husband saw me through it, and my son and my other children. And by the grace of God, I got through it. And then in 2010, my daughter Tina had breast cancer. She'd been suffering for about three and a half years, and she succumbed to it. April 10th. Yeah, in April 2010, and then 6 weeks later, I went to have a mammogram, and they called me within a week and said that they had found cancer. So then I had a double mastectomy in July, and then of course chemo followed that, and so it was. I didn't really call Paul's show at that time. I was really, the chemo just kind of had me, blasted, and I didn't really feel up to it. But once I started getting on the path and getting well again, after I felt like I was strong enough to really give an opinion or anything to the show, that's when I started calling back. But I just kind of let go for a while, just to get myself through it. And, of course, I give it all to the good Lord, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Him. And I've always felt like He left me here for a reason. And now my husband has terminal lung cancer, and it's spread all over his body. And I'm so proud, and I'm so thankful that the good Lord has spared me so I can see him through it, because I know what he's going through, and I think that kind of helps. I think that kind of helps when you're trying to help someone to get through it.
Wow. I didn't know about your daughter.
Yes,
I'm really sorry to hear about that.
Thank you so much. I miss her so much. She was my oldest, and she was my firstborn. And it was really heartbreaking having that surgery. I mean, she died in April, then I had the surgery the following July, and that's all I thought about through my chemo days was I grieved. It wasn't just getting through it. It was grief, but I just prayed hard, and the good Lord come through, and He got me through that too. I know someday I'll see her again.
Well, Phyllis, let me ask you a question here. How do you feel, switching subjects, how do you feel about the Alabama fans that maybe look down on other Alabama fans like you who did not actually go to school there?
I think you tend to think when someone is an alum, especially of a college, you tend to think there goes a very intelligent person. But sometimes intelligence is at the front of at the helm for them, but they lack in common sense. And I think common sense should tell them a fan is someone who cheers, who goes out and buys clothing and memorabilia and buys tickets and comes to the game and sits in those stands and freezes and buys what they have at the concession stands and roots their team on. That's what a fan is, not an alum. You can be an alum and a fan, but you can't just be one. And that's the way I look at that. And I think it's very degrading. And I think whoever thinks like that, they've got a problem. They've got a huge problem. I've got people in my family that graduated from Alabama, but I've also got a lot of people in my family that didn't. But you couldn't find bigger Alabama fans in this country than what you'd find with the family members I'm speaking of right now. And they would tell that man right quick, or anyone who said that. You don't call me a fan. You don't call me a fan. Just because you graduated at Alabama, that does not give you any right to say who can be a fan and who can't, because you're out of line. And that's exactly the way I feel about it.
Phyllis, your reaction to Colin Cowherd about a year ago, that seemed to get you on the national stage. Let me ask you, could you and Colin ever be friends?
You know, John, I really don't know. There's people that's told me that Colin's really a nice person, and he's a nice man. I said, well, then why don't he be nice to me? Why has he got to dig into me with insults about Alabama? He knows that's all it would take. I would be kind to him. I would return the kindness. But if he's going to get on any radio program, including his, and run down the University of Alabama, regardless of whether they're winning or they're losing, it doesn't matter. He's got me after him. And the only reason I come up with that word for him was he was basically putting Auburn in the high places that day and saying Bama would never, they would never be where they were before, that Gus Malzahn owns Alabama, and that from here on out it would just be Auburn. Alabama is no good, no count. And all I could think of was him being at Gus Malzahn's office, or maybe out in the cow pasture, and the name cow turd come at me, and I used it in a fit of anger, arguing with him back. And I really shouldn't have done that, but on the other hand, I said what I said, and I stand by what I said. I can't take it back. I can apologize for it, but I don't think I owe him an apology right now. He needs to be on the same graces. He needs to be meet my kindness if he wants me to think anything of him. I don't hate the man because I don't know the man. I just hate his ways and the way he just digs into the University of Alabama, which I feel like is uncalled for. Most of what he says about Alabama is untrue anyway.
Well, I think he might be eating a lot of crow. He's already eating a lot for the Tennessee game because he got that prediction wrong. But
yeah,
I don't see how Auburn's going to beat Alabama the way they're playing right now.
Well, I don't either, but I'm going to tell you something. When Iron Bowl rolls around, you throw out the record books, and that is the truth. I know that's a cliche, but that is the honest-to-God truth. I have seen Auburn beat us when they weren't supposed to score on us. I mean, I have went to bed crying because Auburn has come from behind and beat Bama. And I'm telling you, it was real tears. I mean, it was boo-hoo city. But you get over it and you go, hey, we'll get them next year. And then next year rolls around, and what do you do? You get Canal, you get Cowturd, you get people like that coming at you. And then you feel like you got to fight everybody else. So what was just a Auburn and Alabama argument or fight is turned into the entire nation, because Florida State, I do not like Jameis Winston. I feel like he's above the law. The Tallahassee police department, they have swept that under the rug. They're continually to sweep anything under the rug. And the way I feel about that, I'll tell you right now, the way I feel about it, I feel like Jimbo Fisher has sold his soul. He has no morals whatsoever. He and Jameis Winston have sold their soul for that Heisman Trophy and that National Championship Trophy. And they're going to do it again this year, they think. But they don't have any idea. They think they're going to do it, but no, Bama's coming for them this time. And this time it'll be a college of character, a college who make sure their young men are in line and who are being decent. I know we've had some problems with our players, but nothing like Jameis Winston has put on the table at Florida State. I feel sorry for the team that has nothing to do with this. I feel sorry for the fans. Except there's some fans that feel like he should get away with anything he wants because he is Jameis Winston. No, he's not. He thinks of himself as some form of a god, and that irks me.
Yeah.
Don't like him. Don't think I could ever like him. He walks with a shrug. He's got a smug grin on his face. I'd love to slap it off.
Phyllis, let me ask you this. What do you want people to know about you that they might not already know?
I want them to know that I have a heart, and I can be hurt, as crass and as ugly as I get sometimes, and I scream sometimes to get my point across. I want them to know it's not personal. I'm not shouting it to any one person or one group of persons, except for the committee now, that group of persons. But I just want them to know that if they want a friend, they got a friend in me. I'm very personable. I love people. I love to be in groups of people. I love my friends. I'm loyal. I'm a loyal friend, and the more the merrier. And I just want them to know that I'm not trying to be anybody that I'm not, and I will never, never, ever do that. I will always be right here in this house, whatever the good Lord wants me to do, and I just want them to know I have a heart, and I'm not mean and crass like so many people has called me. I'm not really mean.
Well, and you know what, Phyllis? That's why I wanted to get you on this show, because I felt like after listening to certain calls on Finebaum, I could tell that you're not necessarily the person that people around the nation might perceive you to be, but.
That's true. That's true. And, but the words they call me and inbred and all of that, and that's what upsets me. That's what irks me the most, and
yeah.
They talk like Alabama and these few southern states that surround us. We're the racist. Hey, they're some of the biggest racists I've ever seen living in up north. So, they have no right to say stuff like that about and just pinpoint Alabama and the citizens who lives in Alabama. Give people here in this state give them a chance. They're good people in this state. They're not the racist, cornbread, no teeth, tobacco-chewing people that they're called. They're good, decent people. And unless you know them, keep your mouth shut when it comes to insults like that, because you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Phyllis, that's great stuff. I have one more question for you. Now,
sure.
Alabama plays Western Carolina next week. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay, but you know what? Here's the thing, Phyllis. Nobody cares about that game because 2 weeks from now, Alabama plays Auburn. What do you think Alabama's going to do to Auburn in T-Town? I
think, at least my gut tells me, Bama will win, but I'm not sure Bama will win promisingly. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Nothing close to a blowout. I think it's going to be a close game, and I think it's going to be scarier than the LSU game was last weekend and the Mississippi State game was last night. I think it's going to be a nail-biter and a knockdown drag-out because Auburn has nothing to lose. And when a team comes onto the field and they have nothing to lose, that's when you got to be careful, because they will bite, they will scramble, they will claw, they'll do whatever it takes to beat the number one team in the nation if Alabama is at number one when the game happens.
Well, Phyllis, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real
You're
pleasure
so
having
welcome.
you on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.